Hello everyone. I've recently been spending a lot of time working with Samyang lenses, and today I can present you with a review of their new 50mm f1.4 AS UMC lens. I've been working with it for a couple of weeks now, so I'll be able to give you quite a detailed report. It's a full-frame manual focus lens, and it can be found for just over £300 or $450 US. It comes in a special video version with a smooth aperture control ring, or this photographic version. There's quite a battle going on among lens manufacturers these days to produce the best fast 50mm camera lens, and it's no surprise, seeing as this is one of the most popular kinds of lens on the market. On a full-frame camera, the 50mm focal length is really nice for general purpose work, being a focal length that's neither wide-angle nor telephoto, giving you a good emphasis on your subject while also providing a slightly wide background. If you're using an APS-C camera with its smaller sensor, then this lens is a lot more zoomed in, the equivalent of about 80mm, making it excellent as a portrait lens while not being too tight for everyday use. 50mm lenses make a happy partner for any camera really, as they give you such good emphasis on your subject and out-of-focus backgrounds, while not being too telephoto and fiddly. And having a maximum aperture as wide as f1.4 means that this lens can let in an awful lot of light, making it great for video work or indoor or nighttime photography. That wide aperture can also get you some very nicely out-of-focus backgrounds, especially compared to your camera's kit lens. Everyone loves a 50mm f1.4 lens. So let's take a closer look at Samyang's offering in this competitive market. The lens body is a little bigger than average without being too big. It's a nice size. It feels very solid and tightly constructed. The lens has no electronics to communicate with your camera, so you set the aperture yourself using this aperture ring. There's one click between f1.4 and f2, and then it clicks every half stop down to f16, where it clicks down one more time to f22. The iris mechanism of this lens has 8 aperture blades, giving fairly smooth bokeh when the aperture is topped down. The manual focus ring turns precisely, and it's very smooth indeed and well damped, feeling slightly heavy. As I mentioned, this is a manual focus lens, so there's no autofocus motor. The front of the lens does not rotate as you change focus, which is a relief for people who use graduating or polarizing filters. It's actually quite an easy lens to focus when you're using live view mode on your camera. The filter thread is a large 77mm in diameter. That's definitely quite big for a 50mm lens, but it's also the de facto standard size for professional lenses these days. A lot of people will already have 77mm filters in their kit bag. In common with most other 50mm lenses, this lens does not have image stabilization. It comes with a good sized lens hood and lens pouch for protection. Overall, the lens is very solid and nicely built, being quite a pleasure to use, especially with that smooth focus ring, which could be particularly useful for video work. Let's look at the all-important picture quality, starting on a full-frame camera, my trusty 20MP Canon 6D. At f1.4, the lens is very nice and sharp in the middle of the image, with good contrast. The lens remains quite sharp even into the corners of the image, although the extreme edges are a touch soft. I'm not seeing any chromatic aberration at all, which is quite impressive. For an f1.4 lens, this is definitely a very good performance. Stop down to f2 for a lot more brightness and sharpness in those corners, and from f2.8 the lens is essentially razor sharp from the corners and back into the middle of the image, with very good contrast levels. So on a full-frame camera, the Samyang lens is a very solid performer indeed, giving some really nice, sharp pictures in pretty much all circumstances. Let's challenge the lens now with a 20MP APS-C camera, a Canon 70D. At f1.4 in the middle of the image, the lens is still giving good resolution, being sharper than average for an f1.4 lens. We see a little purple fringing on the contrasting edges, but that's completely to be expected for a fast aperture lens on an APS-C camera. The corners of the image are a little soft, but we still get usable image quality here. Stop the aperture down to f2 for an improvement in the corners of the image, and also back in the middle. Stop down further to f2.8 for perfect image quality in the middle of the image, with excellent contrast, and the corners of the image are also quite good now. Stop down to f4 or f5.6 for excellent picture quality in the corners. So overall, this Samyang lens is also a good performer on APS-C cameras, giving very decent results. As I said before, there's a lot of competition in the 50mm lens market, so just out of interest, I decided to compare this lens to my other 50mm lens, the Canon 50mm f1.4 USM. How does the Samyang compare to a competing lens in a similar price bracket? Let's take a quick look. Firstly, on a full-frame camera. At f1.4, we see that the Samyang lens gives us a little extra contrast and sharpness in the middle of the image. In the corners of the image, the Samyang lens is tons brighter and a lot sharper. Even stopped down to f2.8, the Samyang lens carries a considerable advantage. Well, not everyone has a full-frame camera, so let's look at the APS-C results, again on a Canon 70D. At f1.4, both lenses have sharpness, but the Samyang lens carries a major advantage in contrast levels in the middle of the image. The Samyang lens is also just a little sharper in the corners of the image. So we can safely say that the Samyang lens is a good step ahead of Canon's older lens design. I'll probably do a big 50mm lens comparison video one day when I'll compare it with other similar lenses. Let's take a look at distortion and vignetting on a full-frame camera. There is a little barrel distortion, a typical amount for this kind of lens, and not particularly noticeable in real-life photography. At f1.4 we see quite a lot of vignetting, or darkness in the corners. But as we just saw in our comparison with the Canon lens, it's less vignetting than average. Stop down to f2 and the vignetting disappears into the corners, and at f2.8 it's pretty much gone altogether. So it's a reasonably good performance for distortion and vignetting. The lens can focus down to just under 45 cm, which is average for a 50mm lens. At f1.4 the close-up image quality remains quite sharp. Stop down to f2 for an improvement, and at f2.8 we see excellent close-up sharpness. The lens has a bit of weakness in working against bright lights. We see a drop in contrast and quite a lot of flaring, as you might notice in the video footage. However, this lens also has a great strength in terms of its bokeh. I've tested a lot of 50mm lenses, and they almost all have problems with their bokeh, but not the Samyang lens. It renders out-of-focus backgrounds very smoothly, with no ugly highlighting, which is quite unusual, and a major advantage for this type of lens. To me, that's another reason it could also be quite a good choice for video work. At the end of the day, Samyang's 50mm f1.4 lens is a very enjoyable and rewarding lens to use, one that neatly sidesteps a lot of the classic problems of its competitors. Most importantly, it's decently sharp at f1.4 with good contrast levels, and almost as importantly, it has very nice bokeh indeed. It also boasts less vignetting than other f1.4 lenses, and its build quality is extremely nice. I've really enjoyed using this lens so far. What will put off a lot of people is its lack of autofocus, but ultimately, anyone willing to try a 50mm lens with manual focus will be rewarded by this Samyang lens's superior image quality, and it's also an excellent lens for video work and filmmaking. This lens has been stuck on my Canon 6D for 2 solid weeks now, and it doesn't look like coming off anytime soon. So I can safely say that it comes highly recommended.